You ever wonder who actually writes the rules for the whole global economy? Because it's not just some random thing that happens, right? It's a system. Think of it like a giant machine with a blueprint, a history, and a really specific instruction manual. And today, we're going to dig into the story behind that machine, the one that basically shapes our entire world.
So here's a question for you. What could the Great Depression and World War II possibly have to do with the money in your wallet today? I know, it sounds a little out there, right? But the answer is pretty much everything. The total economic chaos of the 30s and the absolute devastation of the war, well, that's the reason our modern financial system even exists. It created a massive problem that needed a totally new, kind of radical solution.
All right, so let's get the backstory. Back in the 1930s, the global economy just collapsed. It was a mess. Countries basically turned on each other, trying to get any advantage they could. They started devaluing their money, jacking up taxes on imports, tariffs. It was a race to the bottom, and it was a complete disaster. Then, boom, World War II hits and literally shatters what's left of the world's economy. So by 1944, even with the war still going on, the Allied leaders looked around and said, okay, we absolutely cannot let this kind of chaos happen ever again.
And that brings us to the solution. Picture this. It's the summer of 1944. A bunch of representatives from 44 different countries. They all get together in this quiet little hotel in a place called Bretton, New Hampshire. And their goal? Well, it was absolutely monumental. They were trying to build a whole new global economic system, one that was stable, predictable, and cooperative, right out of the ashes of the war. No small task.
Now, when they all sat down, there were basically two big competing ideas on the table. First, you had the UK's plan, championed by the famous economist John Maynard Keynes. He wanted a super powerful global central bank with a brand new world currency. But the American plan, from a guy named Harry Dexter White, was pretty different. It was less about a central bank and more about a fund to keep currency stable, with the US dollar right at the heart of it all. And, well, guess who won? The American plan. By that point, the US was the world's economic superpower, no question about it, so its vision carried the day.
So here's what they actually built. This new system was built on three main pillars. First, you've got the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which was basically designed to be the world's financial firefighter, putting out economic crises. Second, the World Bank. Its job was to focus on long-term projects, like rebuilding after the war and helping countries develop. And the third pillar, and this was huge, was a system of fixed exchange rates. Every currency was pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar itself was pegged to gold. The whole point was stability, predictability. That was the name of the game.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that first pillar, the IMF, because it really did become the anchor of this whole new system. Honestly, if you want to understand who holds the real power in the global economy today, you have to understand how the IMF is put together. It's all in the architecture.
So on the surface, the structure looks pretty straightforward. You've got a board of governors at the top, one for each member country. Then there's an executive board that runs the day-to-day stuff. A managing director leads the whole thing, backed up by a huge staff of about 3,000 economists. Looks pretty standard, right? But, and this is the key, the real power isn't shown on this org chart. Nope. It's hidden in how the whole thing is funded.
And to get that, we have to talk about something called a quota. Now, I know it sounds a little technical, maybe even boring, but stick with me because this is the absolute key. You can think of it as the source code of the IMF. It's what makes the whole thing run.
So what is a quota? It's actually pretty simple. It's basically the membership fee that a country has to pay to be part of the IMF club. And the size of that fee isn't just picked out of a hat. It's calculated based on how big a player that country is in the world economy. Looking at its GDP, its trade volume, things like that. Long story short, bigger economy, bigger quota.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. A country's quota isn't just about the money they put in. It determines three super important things. First, it decides how much money a country can borrow if it gets into trouble. Second, it determines its share of special IMF assets. But the third one, this is the big one, it determines how much voting power that country gets.
And that brings us right to the heart of it. Who really calls the shots at the IMF? Well, it all comes down to that voting power. And let me tell you, it is not distributed equally. Not even close. It's what's called a weighted voting system.
So think about something like the UN General Assembly, where it's all one country, one vote. Super democratic, right? Well, the IMF doesn't work like that at all. It's run more like a corporation. The more money you put in, meaning the bigger your quota, the more votes you get. It's a shareholder system, not a one-person, one-vote system.
And here's what that looks like in the real world. Check this out. The United States controls a massive 16.5% of all the votes. Now compare that to the next two biggest countries, Japan and China. They each have just over 6%. I mean, the gap is just enormous.
Let's just pause on that number for a second. 16.5%. In an organization with almost 200 members, a single country holds that much sway. Now keep that number in your head, because there's one more piece to this puzzle. And that final number is 85%. See, for the really big, fundamental decisions at the IMF, we're talking about stuff like changing the quotas themselves or altering the founding rules, you need a supermajority to get it done. You need 85% of the votes to say yes.
So you can probably do the math here. If you need 85% to pass a major decision, that means you only need just over 15% to block it. And who has 16.5%? The United States. This means the U.S. can single-handedly block any major change it doesn't agree with. It effectively has a veto, and that is the ultimate result of the system that was designed way back in 1944.
Which leaves us with a really big question for today, right? The world in the 21st century looks nothing like it did in 1944. We have totally new economic giants, and the challenges we face are completely different. So the question is a power structure that was designed by the winners of World War II still the right fit for our modern, super interconnected global economy? That's a huge debate, and it's one that's very much alive today.